There's only 3 different types of people who actually enjoy playing The Last of Us Part 2. But before we get into talking about that, my name is SunGod, and make sure you support this channel by leaving a like and subscribing to the channel with notifications on for daily content. Also consider joining the Discord. But anyways, let's get back into the purpose of this video. First group of people who are obsessed with The Last of Us Part 2 is definitely the most obvious one. And it's going to be the LGBT community, and I know a lot of people are going to get mad at me saying that, but hear me out on that. Now, I know there's a lot of people that argue The Last of Us Part 2 is a game that panders to certain communities and that it is propaganda in that sense, and while I definitely agree with that take, that is not the reason that I say this. The reason I say this in actuality is because of the fact that I have seen from my own personal experience with the fan base that a lot of people are simply into this game because of the fact that there's a lesbian couple. And there's definitely not anything wrong with that. Heck, I of all people have been somebody who has been very avid about supporting representation in media for those who have lack of. However, I feel like it is definitely irrefutable to say that the LGBT community is in a large portion of the sales of The Last of Us Part 2, because the gaming community genuinely hates that game and despised it for good reason. But it definitely just means that in terms of the general consensus of the game and how people perceive it in the public eye, it is not perceived as the best of the 2 Last of Us games. And I see it a lot myself in real life, that a lot of people that are playing it are simply into it because they're gay and they just want a gay game to play, and that's totally fine, but it's definitely irrefutable to acknowledge. However, I will say that while The Last of Us has always had an avid support of LGBT characters and representation for them, it was definitely never something that I even noticed during the events of the first game because of how seamless it was added to the plot. Like the whole storyline with Bill and his boyfriend, and how Bill actually gets emotional and reacts to finding out that his boyfriend had passed. It was beautifully added to the game in my opinion, because it wasn't all in your face, it was just there, and it actually added to the narrative. And I'm not saying The Last of Us Part 2 doesn't also do that in some ways, but this game definitely feels more like it panders to certain communities, at least in the way the plot plays. Like, you definitely can't lie and say that that's not present in the Abby storyline. At the very least, say what you want about Ellie, because I love it. But yeah, one major part of the fan base of The Last of Us is definitely the LGBT. The second type of people that love this game are Naughty Dog Glazer. And when I say Naughty Dog Glazer, I mean somebody that is literally in love and is completely supporting anything and everything that is created or done by Neil Druckmann. And I'm not gonna lie, we all have our favorite game developers, so this is obviously just happenstance and something that is inevitable to happen. But I have a specific Naughty Dog Glazer in mind when I say this, and he's gonna get mad that I name dropped him, but I have a personal story for you guys watching. So I have a buddy that I grew up playing video games with by the name of Skull Assassin 36. That's what we're gonna call him here at least. But right now he goes by the name Lurglizzy. And this guy Lurglizzy and I used to get into heated arguments back in the day when we were kids growing up playing PlayStation together over The Last. Because both of us were major The Last of Us Part 1 fans. He was always super into Uncharted. In fact, he was like one of the top 10 Uncharted multiplayer players in the world. So he was always on Uncharted, but my Naughty Dog game and my multiplayer was always The Last of Us and The Last of Us Fact. So we always went back and forth like that. When The Last of Us Part 2 first came out, him and I were literally going back and forth about how dog shit of a game I personally thought it was. While he thought that my opinion was misguided by the leaks at the game at the time. And I actually argued that it was an amazing game in terms of the gameplay, but the story was. And I tried for the life of me to get him to admit that it was just a dog shit game because of the fact that Naughty Dog fumbled so hard with the story, and he refused to take that stance with me. He was going to die on that hill because he is a Naughty Dog fan that just respects their work so much that he's going to keep it real in terms of his opinion of that. And after sinking hundreds of hours into The Last of Us Part 2 across both the PlayStation 5 and my PC, I definitely can say that I've started to agree with him in the sense that I definitely agree the gameplay for The Last of Us Part 2 is some of the best gameplay I've ever experienced in a game I've ever played in my life. However, that doesn't take away from the fact that the narrative in terms to The Last of Us Part 1 and comparing the two as first game and sequel do not match up that well together outside of a tragedy. And while I get that Neil Druckmann might have been going for a tragedy, I don't think that any of us that were waiting multiple years for the sequel to the first game were expecting that or anticipating that or emotionally ready for it. Because all we wanted was a continuation to the adventures of Joel and Ellie. Ellie and Joel are the only reason people care about the Last of Us franchise, and I still don't understand what the purpose was of making the second game around Ellie losing Joel and having to deal with that grief. If anything, you would think that would be something they would say for the third game, after ending the second game on a sort of cliffhanger where some major villain takes Joel's life. And that would have been a perfect trilogy. I would have actually enjoyed reacting to Joel's death, and I would argue that it was a narrative completion of what his story meant. However, we don't get the opportunity to do that now because of how The Last of Us Part 2 plays out, and I feel like there are some people that are just always going to support Naughty Dog because of the fact that it is something Naughty Dog created. I haven't had a chance to ask my boy Lurglizzy how he feels about their new intergalactic game with the bald-headed chick, but I'm sure that he loves loves that too. I'll have to ask him and get him to comment and tell us what he thinks. But ultimately, the second type of fan that loves The Last of Us Part 2 is a Naughty Dog. And then we have the third and final type of fan that loves The Last of Us Part 2. And here are the ones that I respect. Now, Lurk Lizzie also falls into this category because I genuinely do believe there's a section of people who just simply enjoy the events of The Last of Us Part 2 and they appreciate it as a revenge story. And there are some people that are even capable of breaking apart the narrative in a way that makes it make sense that the cycle of revenge had to end some way with Ellie, and explaining how beautifully tragic the game is in the sense of it being a Shakespearean tragedy instead of just a video game. While I can definitely agree that I can hold that same assessment of The Last of Us Part 2 in terms of it being a well-written tragic narrative, I can at the very least say that I respect those people who see the game as what it is and appreciate the story it was trying to tell, regardless of my personal opinions about the narrative. Because regardless of what you want to say about Neil Druckmann, I can definitely agree that he is a dope writer, because he said the first game, The Last of Us Part 1, is meant to be about love, and I genuinely love that game, while he also states the second game is about hate, and I genuinely despise it. So he definitely is capable of invoking the emotion that he intends the viewers to feel when he's achieving his writing. However, I feel like three people that actually enjoy and appreciate the game for what it is have to fall into one of these three different categories, because there pretty much aren't any others that can justify enjoying this game's existence. I will, however, say that I am definitely starting to understand and appreciate the story of this game a tad bit more than I have in previous years, along with the release of The Last of Us Season 2. Even though I genuinely dislike how the narrative chose to play out, I definitely respect the way that they handled it, in the sense that Ellie had to somehow overcome her grief. I do pray that if they do The Last of Us Part 3, that we get to experience not only some kind of redemption for the character of Ellie, an appreciation for the journey that Ellie and Joel have been on since 2012. When The Last of Us was first revealed all those years ago in an EA trailer, I definitely knew in that moment that it was going to be a life-changing video game. And now, over a decade later, I can say I was 100% right, because we're still talking about it, man. And now I have a YouTube channel where I can yap about it constantly. Definitely expect to hear more The Last of Us yap from me, but I would like to hear some yap from you as well in the comments. How do you feel about The Last of Us as a fan, and where do you think that the fans fall in terms of the categories? Do you think this game is just marketed towards LGBT people? Do you feel that this game is marketed towards people who just understand and appreciate a good story? Definitely leave a comment and let me know. Make sure you like this video and subscribe to the channel with notifications on so you get notified the next time I upload. Also, consider supporting the channel by buying some merch. The link will be in the description. Thanks for watching. I love and appreciate you all. Sun God signing off.
I come in clutch like a genie. Don't talk unless you need me. You talk too much, you need it. All of my bitches look like models, she in love with me. When we link, it's flashing lights and cameras, got a blam.